Well, hello everyone. We are in Young Harris, Georgia today, and savvy listeners will guess that we are visiting with industry veteran Ray Lambert. I met Ray very soon after joining Fulton Concrete in 2002 because we purchased sand from his operation in Newton County on the South River. Randall Porter advised me prior to meeting Ray that he was a colorful character who very much resembled Teddy Roosevelt. As it turned out, colorful didn't begin to be a suitable adjective for Mr. Ray Lambert. Our friendship deepened quickly, especially as we began hunting together. I was most fortunate to have the chance to hunt at Ray's beloved dogwood plantation in McDonough. I have many indelible memories of quail hunts and dove hunts at Dogwood, along with a Jerry Jeff Walker concert at the Pavilion, orchestrated by Miss Mary Lynn for Ray's 50th birthday. While I feel like I know Ray about as well as anyone, I'm confident there is much of Ray's history, particularly his family's early business ventures, that I really like to hear about, to learn more about. Ray, it's so good to be with you today. We've had such a good visit and a great lunch. Please jump in and tell us about yourself.
Well, Bill, always good to see you. Thank you for coming up here. First memories are on the farm. Was born in Atlanta in '55. Dad bought a farm in McDonough in 1958, and we spent every holiday, every summer there. So that's really where I grew up. Went to the Lovett School. Didn't really fit in there. And they would come in talk about their sailing camps they'd been to, and they'd say, "What you do this summer?" I said, "Well, we built fence and worked cows and put up hay all summer." But I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. Dad obviously had been in the industry all his life. And everything we did, he was trying to teach me to be production oriented. Whether we were putting up fence, whether we were putting up hay, anything that we did. And he started me out, my first memories of really being able to do constructive work. He had welded up an extension that he could bolt to the clutch pedal of a 2-ton Chevrolet truck that we had, since I couldn't reach the pedals, and rigged up a hand throttle on it so I could drive the hay truck while the men loaded the hay. And he wouldn't let me drive on the road at that time back to the barn.
Right.
And then we graduated to a hay conveyor that had wheels on it that you would bolt to the side of the truck, and it would actually, so I had to learn to thread the needle with that, and then it would pick up the bale, carry it up to the top, and lay it over on the side above the stake body. So that was, we'd really gotten into high-tech hay production at that time.
Let me pause you real quick. Question just jumped in my head, which happens in these interviews. Refresh my memory on your siblings. I know that you had a sister, but did you have one sibling?
I have one sister, Deanne, who passed away a couple of years ago after a long battle with cancer. Absolutely wonderful.
And was she older, did you say?
No, she was, we were Irish twins. She was 16 months younger than I am. Dad was 48 when he married Mom.
Oh, my.
And so I was born at 50, and Deanne was born at 51. At 51. I was born in 1955.
Right.
But, and like I say, we really enjoyed that in McDonough. It was just an absolutely wonderful life. I learned a lot. We rode horses. We did wagon trains at least 2 weeks every summer. I learned, brake horses, train horses. We had teams of mules. I started, just riding single horses, then learning how to drive a team of mules, and then learned to drive multiple teams of mules. And that was just a natural with Dad. He loved them because that's how they actually started grading and quarrying, was with mules and wagons. I still have one of the old bottom dump wagons that they would load with a steam shovel if they were lucky, or load by hand in the quarries.
Oh my word.
It was, if we had to work like they did back then, we would all starve. It's,
You're right. You're right.
The brothers, Granddaddy Lambert started, well, they had sawmills. My dad's first job when he was like 7 or 8 years old, would walk to the sawmill in the morning before the men got there. They'd always have it next to a creek or next to a water source, and would carry the buckets of water up and fill the boiler up on the steam engine, and then get the fire going. And then that way, when the men got there at 6 o'clock, would have a full head of steam. They didn't have to wait on it and then go immediately.
They were ready to go.
Oh yeah, they were ready to go.
And that was his job.
Yes.
It's how old?
About he said 7. He couldn't remember.
Right. He was a boy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was just what they did. Now, he obviously went to bed earlier than anybody else did because he was up earlier. But they learned to depend on each other.
Yes.
At a very early age, and that was what he tried to instill in me. Is just when you say you're going to do something, you damn well better do it.
I'm sitting here thinking it might be good right now, Ray. Go on and this, this is your interview. It's certainly about you, but your family and the background is so important. Why don't you just take a moment now and talk about your dad, and then what I'm saying. In other words, your family and the business. Kind of bring that background story in. I think it would be good.
They all initially started working on the farm, and then Granddaddy Lambert logged.
Now, where was this in?
This was in Maryville, outside of Maryville, Tennessee.
Maryville, Tennessee. Okay.
6 Mile.
Gotcha.
And he acquired a lot of land up there. He'd buy a piece of property and would log it, and there wasn't any real value to it to sell, so he would just keep it. And they amassed several thousand acres up there that they ended up selling some of it to the Smoky Mountain National Park. They started crushing rock with steam-powered crushers, and we're talking little small stuff that you would pick up and throw the rock in there by hand.
Wow.
And just rock on top of the ground, and that slowly progressed into blasting with hand-hammered in blast holes, and then loading with dynamite. And Dad said the two most important men in the early quarries was the blacksmith and the carpenter.
Yes.
Where they built all of their bins out of wood, for the line shafts, they would build all of their supports and platforms, and for the bucket elevators later on, and all that out of wood, because steel was just still a valuable commodity. And
now, what years, Ray, are we talking? You think in this time period?
They started in the 20s.
Oh my!
And really, they'd been crushing in the iron ore industry and that sort of thing for quite a while, but and there were a few. Construction aggregate quarries. A lot of it was sand and gravel and just what you could get up, off of the ground.
Yeah.
And how I ended up here in Young Harris.
Yeah.
Dad had a quarry here when it was just him by himself in 1932. And he told me they had a quarry here. Well, I never did find it until later years, because I said, I couldn't find that quarry you had. He said, son, you're looking at the quarries they have today. He said, think about that, about us, having a man shake the steel, driving it with a sledgehammer, and then, taking a wet rag on a stick and going down in the hole to swab the cuttings out, and then blasting it out there, and the men beating it up with sledgehammers until you could fit it in the crusher. And they put their first rock on the road in 1932 between Young Harris and Blairsville.
What about that?
But that's how really Granddaddy Lambert started that, and then all the brothers kind of went their separate ways and started their own crushing outfits. And they went to a letting, and I can't remember, I don't know if it was for a job for a dam or some road. Well, all of them showed up individually to bid on the job, and everybody thought that, hell, they're colluding, and it's, and I don't know if one of them got the bid or not, but they said after the job, said, well, everybody thinks we're in on it together, won't we just go in together? And so it didn't matter what they owed or what they had, they all went in and got an equal share. And at that time, there were 5. There was George, J.B., Walt, he was the oldest and ended up becoming the president, John, and Dad. Uncle George passed away on the job. He had leukemia and actually died in a boarding house on one of their jobs.
Oh, my.
And it just worked. He worked the day the day before he died. And they were all very, very talented, hardworking, and liked to play hard too. Did a lot of fighting and drinking and carrying on that you could get away with back in the day. But and then Dad, the first job that put them on the map was the Calderwood Dam, and they did that for TVA.
Yeah.
And that was war effort. Dad was the only one of the brothers that went in the military in World War II. He enlisted. He was 36 when he went in 42.
Oh, my.
And they all called him Pop.
Yes.
But he still had, you had the rationing stamps at the time, and he had a black sticker on his automobile, and that meant he could get gas anywhere, anytime. And he pulled in front of a general up there when he was a buck sergeant and got gas, and the general could only get like 3 or 4 gallons, and that started an interesting conversation.
I bet it did.
But and then after World War II, Birmingham Slag,
Yeah.
a company that basically had, they were great businessmen, the Irelands, and they were crushing the slag from the steel mills, and they came over and had bought the quarry in Stockbridge that had been through several hands. It was started in the 1800s. And they were good business folks, but they didn't know anything about crushing granite. And so they basically made a deal. Dad was the only one at the time that wasn't married. So he came from Maryville down here to Stockbridge. Lambert Brothers at the time, I think he said they had about 20 quarries, but now these were all small, little, very small quarries.
Right.
And came down, and he said it took a couple of years to straighten the quarry out. He said you could walk down the walls here. And I mean, they just really, really did know what they were doing. And then, basically through the 40s, after World War II and into the 50s, and then when Eisenhower got elected in 52, it just really
took off.
Really took off.
Yes.
And
the interstate, that whole interstate system.
And just road improvements, and then they still did joint ventures, Birmingham Slag, they call it Stockbridge Stone. And they started the Red Oak Quarry in 61, Kennesaw in, 59, Norcross in 57. Dad said he got stuck on Beaver Ruin Road when they were first going over there to open that quarry up. And Kennesaw, if you look at it now, you see the high wall over there where the airport is. That was a mistake from Little Bill Ireland. Told the people that wanted to put an airport in there, y'all can, as long as y'all are operating that as an airport, you can have a never-ending lease. and Dad said he like had a heart attack.
I bet.
When he found out about
I bet.
it. And there's literally billions of dollars worth of stone
Yes.
up underneath that you can look at, but you can't
You
do
can't touch
anything with. They finally ended up selling it to the airport, but and then they ended up merging. I mean, that was a huge growth period for them. Dad was always trying to increase production, and that meant, going from diesel, in the early days, gasoline-powered trucks and shovels to diesel-powered trucks and shovels. And then I really feel like they got into kind of the modern end of it, or the early modern part of it when they started with the electric shovels. Dad bought a 1400 P&H, Pauling and Harness-Fager, for Stockbridge that had a 4-yard bucket on it, and that was a huge deal.
Wasn't it?
And they ran that thing, and I showed you the plaque, the nameplate off that original shovel, and which, I mean, that's what I grew up when I was in the early days. Well, first started with Vulcan. Before I was old enough to work in the quarries, they wouldn't let you work, there till you were 16. So worked for Power Equipment, McDonough Power Equipment in McDonough, in the engineering department, where I learned to weld and do machine work and all that sort of stuff. Just work, and then they went on strike that one summer, and that was like in summer '73, and I helped a little bit at the Stockbridge quarry when they were putting up that last conveyor. It was 998 foot long, and I don't know why the hell they didn't add 2 more feet to it. I never did figure that out, but it was that was a state-of-the-art plant up there, and it was really kind of funny. Later in life, I ended up demolishing a lot of that plant when I was stripping for Vulcan. But anyway, 74, been in a good bit of trouble, and Dad looked on the big Vulcan map, and Vulcan had just acquired Olmus Rock in San Antonio, Texas. So he sent me out there, and I didn't find out till about 20 years later that he gave the instructions for them to work them at me as hard as they could and to pay me as little as they could, which they succeeded at. I had been there working in the shop, and I had good mechanical skills, but they had a tractor-trailer load of Portland cement pull up on a flatbed. They sent me down there to unload it and put it in little, not Quonset huts, but little buildings where the drivers, when they would come out, and they called it a 2-sack mix, they'd throw 2 of those bags of cement up on the bumper of the concrete truck for the finishers. Well, I unloaded that whole tractor trailer, a 45-foot flat trailer, loaded by myself, and you can't reach it all. You've got to get up there, and I'd put 8 or 10 bags down to where I could reach them from the ground, and then I'd have to get back up there and put them back down again, so I was at least double handling them. And finally got all that unloaded, and all that was well and good. And then the next day, another one showed up. They came to get the empty and dropped another one off. And I really wished I'd stacked it different in those buildings if I'd have known that, because I had to climb over a lot of that stuff that I had stacked to get it up higher in there where it would all fit in the buildings. So I learned a lot about that. Absolutely loved it out there. We just had, back in those days, it was a wonderful family atmosphere. There were only like three whites in the whole quarry.
Wow.
The rest were Mexican guys. I absolutely loved them because they worked like hell and they played like hell. And I really, really enjoyed that. Learned a lot out there. Had a couple of the top mechanics would take me under their wing, show me tricks. I had a welder, Jose, he showed me, really got me into, I knew how to weld a fair amount, but it's different in a rock quarry. And you've got to, you've got to make it work, and you've got to use the right kind of rod. And he let me weld a truck bed up completely with 60-14, and I was so proud of myself because it looked so good. And after the first day, every one of those welds had cracked right down the middle. Got to grind that out, and he said, listen, Capron, you do this with 70-18 or 70-110. And after I learned that and then started looking at it, and that's kind of a step
Yes.
that you take. Absolutely enjoyed it. We were running the primary machine out there. They just parked an old ADD shovel. They had a 988. They didn't even call them A models then. It was just a 988 with dice treads on it. And that I learned about putting those things back up. If the operator was having a bad day and spun the tires, it would break those. It was like dozer grousers on chains around the tires, because the limestone, it's great on crushers, but death on tires and conveyor belts. So got good at that. They had just parked 2 coring iron mules, which were little front dump. They were probably 6 or 7 yard, and it was a gravity dump with a 471 Detroit in the back, and you drove behind the bed, and they had just phased those out, but I saw them run them there 2 days. We had an R22, 22-ton Ute, and then an old beat-up 35-ton Wabco that had a drive system on it. I have not seen one since. Really a weird truck. But I saw them run those 2 things, and of course they were real good at turning over, and safety wasn't as much a concern in the 60s and 70s
Yep.
as it was now. That's something that I really was glad to see.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was an absolutely wonderful experience. Really my first real taste of it, and there was never any doubt when I was growing up what I was going to do.
Right.
I mean, it was with a family just entrenched with it, and of course I would hear those comments when I'd show up at a quarry, oh, it's another one of those damn Lamberts. And so that was, I figured that was my middle name. But
So you had the Irelands.
you had the Irelands
and Lamberts.
And then they merged in 1957
Okay.
with Vulcan to Tinning.
Okay.
And that was really the easiest way to get on the New York Stock Exchange, or you basically didn't have to do an IPO.
Yeah.
If you basically bolted on to an already existing company. I see why they did it, but at the time, it was one of the most complex mergers. And I mean, they were all still haggling at the deal of it. And Ireland's good business folks. Dad admitted, he said, they out-traded us on that deal. And he said, but we did well. And, when you think about it, they all just basically came out of the mountains
Right.
barefoot,
Yes.
and then did extremely well.
Now, refresh my memory. Our friend and your cousin Bart, right? Bart
Yeah,
Boyd.
Bart.
Would you connect the dots there?
Bart actually worked for me in the summers over there in Alabama, and everything bad that Bart will ever do, he learned from me. But
All the good stuff was what he figured out.
Well, he learned a lot. Bart is he's the full meal deal. He knows the business end, and he knows that from the ground up, because he worked from the ground up doing that. But anyway, that was my Uncle Gene Boyd married my Aunt Ruth. She was the youngest.
Okay.
So he was the youngest of the bunch.
Yeah.
He came up and worked at when you married into the family, you had to work just as hard as the rest of the family, and he did. and really excelled. Bart's dad, Bart and Duff's dad, was Leslie Ray, their oldest son. He was tragically killed. So Bart wasn't even born when his dad died.
Yes.
And so Ricky Neal, a state patrolman, married his mother.
Yes.
That was a wonderful, wonderful deal for him. But that's how Bart's obviously an industry leader. I'm
Yes.
extremely proud of him.
Yes.
Has done extremely well. But we had, Gene Boyd married into the family, some others married into the family that ended up in the construction industry, the Borings,
Yes.
Dalton Rock,
Yes.
Marcus Boring married my Aunt Annis, and then they had 3 sons and a daughter who all the sons ended up in the quarry industry and were industry leaders. I was closest to Harold of any of them.
I remember
the
that.
other 2 were much older, which Harold was a lot older than I was, but we both had a passion for hunting, and he led me astray at an early age, but learned a lot from Harold. Good guys. I had a lot of good hands-on mentors
Yes.
coming up, and people you never hear about. E.L. Harrison, Mr. Pepper at the shop, Niederhauser. He came down out of the Iron Range and taught me how to, about to put all the transmission and gearboxes together on the P&H shovels and work on the crushers, and I was very lucky to have a lot of those.
A lot of
men
mentors.
that took an interest in me.
Yes. And of course, it was a passion of yours. It's obvious. You love it. It's in your blood. Now let me ask you this. Tell me about Miss Mary Lynn. When did she come into the picture? Kind of take us into to that part of your life a little bit.
Well, I had several years I was pretty rank, and ended up, Miss Mary Lynn, her father had actually did the closing for my dad on the farm in McDonough.
Okay.
And I had known him, and we were going, my father, mother, and sister and I were going to Florida, and we stopped at a Stuckey's.
Yep.
And there was Mr. Tom, Miss Ann, Elaine, and Miss Mary Lynn, and I just about did a backflip. And so anyway, that was early, but I tucked that away. And
Roughly what year do you think that was?
Probably 76.
Yeah.
76. We started dating in 78. I was so struck by her that one of her good friends, and was one of my good friends, Zip Hinton, I said,
Zip, yeah.
Yeah, Zip. He and I got in a lot of trouble. But anyway, I said, ask Mary Lynn if I came over there, would she go out with me? So I chickened out, I'll admit it. But anyway, we started dating, and it just, and it's kind of one of those things,
Yeah.
You know
Oh,
when
yeah.
you've gotten there. And so anyway, we dated for 5 years, and I was still, at that time, I didn't go into the Marine Corps until 79, so we had been dating about 6-7 months, and so she came to visit me with my parents one time at Paris Island on a Sunday. Yeah, and I didn't know you could do that. Anyway, they
Interesting.
I was able to go and ride around with them for a while, and then she and my parents, and and my Uncle A.J. Wardrop, who had married my mother's sister, Aunt Faye, who passed away with cancer. But anyway, he was in the Marine Corps and had been a big influence, and that's really, between he and Zell Miller, that was the main reason that I went in the Marine Corps. Well, we had a big Iranian student group at University of Tennessee. I was up there for a brief period, and mainly drinking and fighting. But anyway, and we had an Iranian student group burning American flag up there, and I had so much fun beating them up, I figured it'd be a lot of fun to kill them. So I joined the Marine Corps the next day, and then Mr. Carter did not send us, and we're paying for that today. But yeah, we married in '83 on the farm. Lived in the farmhouse down there, and I was with Vulcan. I was at the shop, and she would get up. I would leave the house at 4:30. She would get up and fix me breakfast at 4 in the morning, and she was doing it. And I said, "Honey, you know you don't have to do this." I shouldn't have said that.
That was a mistake.
That was the end of that, which that was kind of unfair for her. And she adapted to it quick, because in those days, you stayed there until you were ready to run in the morning. And I had several, which at the shop, I kind of specialized on the crushers, the gyratories, and we were running all Simon's crushers, Nordberg's then. But when you poured concaves, especially at what I call the Holy Land, which was either Norcross or Kennesaw, you would stay there, whoever was in charge of pouring the zinc, tearing the old concaves out, doing the prep, pouring the zinc. I had probably at least 6 or 7, and I can't even hardly remember now, of days where I was there anywhere from 44 to 48 hours straight.
Oh my!
and it just you get really, really tired, and then you kind of catch your second wind.
Yeah. And
you would go through at least 4 shifts of people coming in. The regular crew coming in there, they would help, because there wasn't anything else they could do until the pit crew. And but we had some great times, and a lot of the production managers and the VP of production, and it would really kind of warm your heart when you'd be there at about 2 or 3 in the morning, and you look up, and there would be a division president standing up there in his T-shirt looking down.
No kidding.
And that was Jerry Board, and he would be there looking down, and Lambert, you need anything?
Man.
And
wow.
That just really that would really encourage you. And but learned a lot then moved on. I started in production, went to Red Oak Quarry in probably 81, I guess. No, 80. Yeah, either late 81, 82 as pit foreman. And it was kind of funny, the 2 shovels that we had there, we were down to 1 by then. It was a 1500 P&H, which was kind of an oddball, but my first job at the shop, there was a guy from the shop that I would go by and pick up from McDonough, and we would drive up to Red Oak, and I assembled that shovel from the ground up. They had bought it, Pepper had bought it out in out west somewhere, and it was somewhere around a 5-yard machine, and but we just basically rebuilt it as we were going, and so that was a big help, because I knew everything, the ins and outs of that shovel when I came in and took that pit over. Worked there as a plant foreman, or as a pit foreman, and then changed me up to the plant foreman. and learned a lot there. Charlie Weed was the superintendent, C. Weed, and so he absolutely, that was the tightest son of a bitch that I have ever met. But he always had the best cost, and I mean, could make a nickel squeal. I would just cuss him under my breath on stuff that he made us do. Instead of getting AR flat bars to weld on the scalping screen, he would make us weld top hammer drill steel down on that. And if anybody's ever tried to weld drill steel, it is about impossible. And you would have them come off. I mean, even the best of welders would have some break loose. So I got to where I was inspecting those at the end of every shift, and then have to go back sometimes and reinforce them. And remember one night when we had the airport job going, it was probably at that time the second runway or the third maybe. Yeah. But anyway, we had a speed reducer on the shuttle belt on the wash bins go out. Well, I mean, that's what we were selling was washed stone. And it was one of those old round falk that, just basically pressed on the shaft. And I took that thing apart all the way down to the last. And then finally, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I just finally had to take a torch and cut it off. I woke up a guy that I knew with Motion Industries. Yeah. Called him and said, all right, I need a speed reducer. Get it out here. He had it to me out there before 4 o'clock, and we had it on and had them running. They were in there, and I would wear coveralls. And so anyway, I'd taken my coveralls off, and, it looked like I was clean. I'd wash my hands and all. Well, I'm in there. I'm asleep in the scale house with my feet up on the desk in there, and it wasn't a nice desk. It was an old ratty desk. And man, Charlie couldn't stand to see that. He came in, knocked my feet off, and so anyway, I got up and I said, Charlie, I've been here all night. I'm fixing to head on in. I said, the speed reducer went out up there on the shuttle belt, and I did everything I could. I couldn't get that off of the shaft, and I had to cut it off and buy a new speed reducer. We're not paying for a new speed reducer. What do you mean? To take that thing off? And I said, I got a better idea. You take the damn thing off if you want it off. Well, of course, doing that airport job, that thing paid for itself in the first 30 minutes.
No doubt.
Of shipping.
No doubt.
But anyway, I really did. Charlie had a couple of fisticuffs over there with unruly employees that, anyway, Charlie stood by me. I'll always appreciate that.
Right.
And we had one that got in the loader. When we were loading steel in the bucket, he had no business getting in the loader and about ran over me and another guy. Wow. I grabbed him and we just dove out of the way, and he went through the steel rack and clipped a conveyor. So I was a little bit upset.
Man.
But anyway, it just, and that was a lot of the stuff we saw in the early days. There was just wasn't as much safety emphasis.
Right.
And I think we may have gone to the extreme now.
Yeah.
Whereas, even like the electrical switchgear, if we called an electrician to wire any of the motors except one on the primary or one of the secondary crushers, they'd cuss us out. And I meant, so, everything from about 100 horsepower down, we would get it down, put it up there ourselves, and wire it ourselves. And I mean, you knew how to do it. Hell, it had a chart in the inside there. And, you'd, before you put a load on it, you'd check it. If it wasn't running the right way, then you'd turn it, turn two of the leads the other way. And no big deal, and like switch boxes, when they first came out with those thermal guns, we would open up the switch boxes with everything running and check our contacts to see if anything was loose, and then make a note of it, and then go back that evening and cut it off, or tighten them up and then check them again. But had my first really close call over there, working one Saturday on the primary. We had a 4265 gyratory over there. Well, it had the hydroset where you could adjust it up, you know, as it wore, and you wanted to keep in spec, you could just adjust the head up. And if if the power blinked or it choked or something, you could use that to help it where you didn't have to dig it all the way out. Well, it had a hydraulic line going down to feed the hydroset, and if the crusher operator wasn't paying attention and filled the cavity up underneath it, a rock would get behind that and pull it down, and then the next one would pull it down, the next one would pull it down further, and then all of a sudden rock was beating on it, and you'd look and there'd be hydraulic fluid going up the belt. Well, I had welded up a kind of a manifold where it would be hidden basically under the crusher, had all those pieces welded, was putting it in, and had to wait till the oil drained, welded everything up, and then sent the operator up. All right, go cut the oil pump on. And I had one little leak. He immediately came back down. No, cut it off. I had to wait till the oil, clean that off, welded that spot up, sent him back up. I'm sitting there intently watching that thing, and he cut the feeder on up underneath me.
Oh my word!
And it sucked me down chest deep in that surge stone.
Wow.
And the only thing that really saved me is it went out on the feeder. It had a Centron incline feeder, and it went out on the bank or out on the belt, and then when it got to the basically angle of repose, it couldn't go any more than that's as far as I went. Well, the feeder was still running. He went up there and went to sleep.
Oh my goodness.
It took me, I hollered until I just couldn't even speak. It took me about 45 minutes to dig out myself, and I just had, of course, suck torches, all the tools, hood, leads, and then after I got out of that, it took me about 15 minutes before I could even stand up and even start up the stairs. And there wasn't any glass left in the control house when I got through. But anyway, I learned a valuable lesson, but you never think about, and we were doing tag out then,
yeah.
But me and one man, and I never even thought about him, and he was the crusher operator, and I never even thought about that, but I never did anything after that I didn't lock it out.
Right.
But then went to Madras as the superintendent there. Had a lot of problems at that quarry. Great operator down there, but he was pretty much scared of the men.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that problem at all. And it took me a little while to get everything straightened out, but we got that cleaned up. We were running a 1600 P&H at that time down there, which I think was about probably a 7-yard machine, 6.5, 7 yard with 35-ton trucks, and running a 42, 48 jaw. I learned some good tricks at the shop. That was always working loose. Fixed that pretty quick by just building bolts and then heating the bolts up cherry red in the center, and then putting it on there and tightening it up. And if they didn't break, they weren't coming
off.
No,
they weren't going to come off.
But we had some good times there. It was kind of funny. When I was there, I had a great crew, and they were all from up around Robbinsville, North Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, they came to me on a Friday. There was like 4 or 5 of them. I think there were 4 of them, and really my best people. And they said, Ray, they opened the mill back up in Robbinsville, and we're going back to work up there.
Oh,
so
my word.
For about 2 weeks, I would go down, I would drive one of the haul trucks down into the quarry and park it right, put it, and then get on the shovel, and I would load that truck, and then my foreman, and I can't think of his name unseen, but he lived over there right next to the Florida Rock Quarry over there in Tyrone. but he would drive the other haul truck down. Well, he would climb through, he'd park them just where he could climb out of one truck, go through the door in the other one, and so I'd load that one truck, and it'd be up really close, so it wasn't optimal loading that. And then the other one, I had to reach way out to load it, but we did that for about two weeks. Had one man up there, and we'd run the surge pile full. Thank God we had a surge pile. And we'd run the surge pile full, and then we'd go up there and run the plant. And so, I mean, it was, that was interesting. We had the one guy on the wash plant, and then had a loader operator. So we had there were 5 of us there. And I mean, we did that until we could get some help.
So tell me, transition into your Lambert sand business. Get us into that. I want to hear about.
I had a cousin, Harry Lambert, come to me and was wanting to do this, and I had never fooled with natural sand. Had always been either in limestone or in granite, and he kept badgering me about this, and so anyway, I started looking at it. Well, I was still a Vulcan Company man, and I went to them and I said, "Is this something y'all would want to get into?"
Right.
And I basically offered it to them, and I said, and they said, "Ray, we think this would interfere with our manufactured sand sales." And so anyway, we looked at it, and Dad, he said, "Yeah, Ray, you ought to do that. You're gotten where you can do something on your own." And so anyway, I gave Vulcan a month's notice. Kenneth Lambert, a distant cousin, was the area manager. And anyway, I was there at work 3 weeks, and he said, "I need you to stay on another month until we get somebody up here." Well, I stayed on another month, so 2 months. And then he came to me about a week before that, and he said, "Ray, I really need you. I've got somebody coming in," and so I stayed 3 months.
That was your notice.
Yeah, and my notice. And so anyway, I said, all right, this is it. I got to leave, because, I mean, we'd already ordered equipment. And really, looking back on it, made a lot of mistakes early on, got way too big of equipment. And a lot of that was, at the time, seemed like the right thing to do, but you got to feed all of that. And if you produce a lot, you better be ready to sell a lot.
Yeah.
And there are, especially when you're dredging out of a river, let's say you would make certain decisions on something once a week in a rock quarry, you would be making those decisions several times a day.
Wow. Just
because of the obstacles in the river and just everything, it really fights against you. And you basically only got, the tip of the spear is that dredge. Once you get it in that pipe and to the plant, I've always said you make your money in the pit. Once you get it up there to the plant, hell, a monkey can do it. And I mean, as long as you take care of the stuff and do your feeding right and all that, it's make or break in the pit. We did that for, let's see, and we were having to move the plant site about every 2 years. We sold 400, I think our in 88, I think we did 440,000 of one size, which wasn't bad.
Yeah.
We did, like some Atlanta Stadium, and then winter of 89 and 90 hit. We were kind of scrambling. And anyway, we had gone in 88. Vulcan had called me, Danny Shepard. He was still with the company the first time.
Right.
And called me, and they had an operation in Shorter, Alabama. And I think Brown and Watson was running it for them. And they wanted me to go down and look at it and see if I was interested in taking that over for them. And we went down and looked at it and traded with them, and we were supposed to produce 300,000 tons of sand a year for them and had a 3-year contract. Sand down there was an absolute byproduct.
Right.
Sand was everywhere down there. Good quality sand, but it was everywhere down there. And prices were cheap. And I think at the time we had agreed to produce sand and load it on the rail car for somewhere around $2.25.
No kidding. What about that?
Oh, well, and that was, and we were going to make money at that.
Yeah.
And we did the first year. Dravo Basic Materials was the competition down there. They had 3 small plants, but they had been down there for years operating these, and they had just piles and piles of sand, and they didn't want a new kid on the block coming in and disrupting that, and they dropped the price of sand down to nothing. Vulcan lost the contract and their sales contract, and they came to me and said, Ray, what are we going to do? And they said, we don't have anything. They said, we know we've got a contract. And so we had, when we started producing the sand, we were doing it with a dredge down there. That seemed like the right thing to do. But we started noticing that the deeper we got, we were getting into some alluvial gravel there. It wasn't a high percentage, but Vulcan wasn't selling any of that. I said, we're already set up. Now, we knew we weren't going to make any money the first year just because of the mobilization, demobilization, pouring concrete, everything setting the plant up and all, and was planning on, making it up the second and third year, so that kind of threw us for a loop. And I talked to them and I said, well, if y'all aren't going to do it. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. That we can't make money at that. And I said, well, what about me taking over your leases? And it was, I think it was Denard was the president at the time, and he said, well, let me check and see if Southern Division is interested in doing it. And they weren't interested in doing it. Well, we got down there and kind of figured out, we took the dredge and the plant back to Newton County and started producing river sand over here, and then started kind of put together some ragtag equipment, and we went over there and started dry mining it and saw that we could do that better as long as we dewatered it. Well, we got to producing some gravel and selling some gravel, and saw that we liked that. And so anyway, started kind of upgrading equipment a little bit, and then I'd put together a real small plant over there. And of course I was married, young kids, and Harry said, you go back, you're good at building plants, you go back, build us a bunch of conveyors, build us a plant, and I'll keep this running best I can. So that's what we did. Went back over there, and at the time we did not have a log washer. I found a small one. We were running it, and then I started looking for equipment and found 2 of the big log washers. I went up to West Virginia, bought a bunch of old horizontal screens out of the coal mines up there for next to nothing, and they were flat screens. I changed them to incline screens because we wanted to be able to, they just would wash the rock a lot better, and we'd get better throughput through them. And built a bunch of conveyors, bought stuff everywhere, would go to surplus places, buy pedal block bearings here, conveyor pulleys here, trough and idlers, and then just start building the conveyors. And Bart came over and helped me with that. And I had Bart and Zeke. They were great friends, have been lifelong friends. And, we were down there. Bart learned to weld good. He was helping me put it up. I taught him how to turn a crane over. And how to make sure that when you go buy something used from somebody that's on the railroad, you better damn sure make sure that the switch is thrown. But anyway, we got it up, and I built a really good plant and had, and it was draconian as far as the stuff we had to do. We would have to put a man on the belt to literally pick the roots and the mud balls best he could off of the belt.
Wow.
We ended up, I really got it, we started really pouring it out good then. We had a problem, and I'm not going to get into that as far as Harry and I ended up busting up.
Yeah.
It was very unfortunate. We ended up winning all the litigation, and so anyway, that put me over there full time, away from my family. But you just do what you have to do. And we got to producing a whole lot and producing a good grade of stone. I was very close to my customers, and when you're doing that, you're the sales VP, you're the production VP, and when we had those dark times, fortunately, Miss Mary Lynn agreed to come into the office. We had to let our office manager go. They had blocked me out of the computer. I mean, it really got kind of ugly. But Miss Mary Lynn came in at a very dark time and really helped us and got the office back on the straight and narrow. And when you have to pay the railroad in 15 days, and your customers sometimes don't pay you. And Fulton was always good about paying. They paid us like clockwork. But some of them, would take 60 and sometimes stretch into 75 days paying.
Right.
And I had swapped over, when I was doing that, I'd swapped over banking. That was kind of, after the Williams brothers had sold out, and Mr. John and I were great friends.
Yes.
He really, and I don't know what it was, but he took a real liking to me and taught me a lot. And it just, when we started doing banking, I'd never had, and when we were running the company, I'd never had a line of credit. And he, when we were switching everything over to his bank, he said, Ray, what do you have for a line of credit? I said, I've never had one, Mr. John. And he said, you can't operate a business without a line of credit. He said, I'm going to do you $750. No, we'll do $1 million.
Right.
And we didn't have to use it much, but when we had to pay the railroad,
yes,
that came in awful handy. He was very fair with us on the rates. Mr. John would have his bank president drive him over there to Shorter, because he kind of knew the ups and downs of going through, and he just came over to check on me, and we were over there running. It was pouring down rain, and I mean, we're running just lickety-split. And he said, you're over here running in the rain. I said, yes, sir. He said, Ray, you know what you're doing. And I said, well, we kind of have to, Miss John. I said, we can't let our customers down. I can't let you down. And we had great relationships. Steve Shaw with Couch, just an absolutely wonderful person. They were probably our largest single customer. And then W.L. Maddox, Southern Concrete, Scruggs down in the south, and we were shipping. We were got DOT qualified in 3 different states, shipping by rail, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia, and was starting to do well. I brought Dad over there to the plant, and I was piling this sand up, piling it up, and when we ended up later on, when we sold to Mark Marietta, we had somewhere between 3 and 4 million tons in stock.
Goodness.
That was the highest point in Macon County.
Wow.
And I mean, just acres and acres. That's what we did all day, every day on Saturday, was haul sand away from the plant. And we're steady loading rail cars during the week.
Wow.
And anyway, I brought Dad over there, and I took him up on top of the pile, and he looks over here and looks over there and then looks back behind us, and he said, "Hell, y'all ought to put y'all's office up here." I was freaking out. I said, "Dad, what are we?" He said, "Boy, don't worry about it. Just pile it up. It's good stuff. You're making money on your gravel." I said, "Just pile it up." And we did, and that was kind of I think really the main reason that obviously we had the plant going and we're selling gravel good and in a pretty good deposit. But I had met Steve Zelnick a couple of times. He had been with Vulcan. He was the CEO of Mark Marietta.
Right.
And they had some leases over there behind us that were basically landlocked. I mean, they couldn't get to them. They couldn't get to the spur. There wasn't any way that they could get to them. And I called him, and I said, and they said, "Yeah, Ray, I remember you." I mean, it wasn't, like we were taking showers together, but I mean, it was, we knew each other. And so he said, I said, "Miss Steve," I said, "I'd like to buy these leases from y'all." And he said, "Ray, we're not in the business of selling leases." He said, "I've heard you've gotten to be a pretty big pain down there." They had already, at that time, they had bought Dravo Basic Materials. And he said, "I understand you're a pretty big pain down there. Well, let me just come down and see you." And so we set up a time, and he came down, and we were in an unbelievably, at that point, and it couldn't have been better time, and we were in an unbelievably rich deposit of gravel.
Yes.
And it was just pouring off of all the belts.
Wow.
And he pulled up, and he saw that, and because he had been to his plants, and it looked like it was coming off about one rock at a time, And so anyway, he sent a Don Winchester down. And Don,
roughly what year were you talking, you think? Was that?
That was in 95.
Okay, 95.
That was in 95.
Okay.
And he, Don, great Christian guy, just I really enjoyed him. And he was, you could tell, I mean, believe me, I knew who he was working for, but he was one of those that you just felt comfortable because he wasn't going to tell you a lie.
Yeah.
And we ended up negotiating with them, and once they kind of saw what kind of assets we had, and we had good equipment in good shape. Really had more equipment than they had at their plants. They had 3 plants, and we were producing as much as they were with those 3 small plants. That, and we're on rail. And what I ended up doing, we were loading, and our sales had really picked up because we were running at night. I mean, I was running 2 shifts. We ran 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. And I said, hell, if we're going to be running at night, we're going to ship at night. And we let all the truckers know that. And, buddy, they were in there because, they could make a couple of runs down south and beat the traffic. And I'm not going to say they were overloaded, but anyway.
I hear you.
But they that worked out good for us. And then loading sand cars at night and all. So, I mean, we had it going on pretty good. Negotiated with them. Came up with a good, fair price on it, and they bought me out, or bought the assets of Lambert Sand and Gravel over there.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny. Their attorneys, we had been using Sutherland, Brennan, and Aspel as our corporate attorneys. And that was their attorneys. And of course, they paid them millions a year. We paid them as little as we could a year. So they were their attorney, and then the guys, we really liked them, with Sutherland Brenner. Larry Pless, he was our attorney. So it's Miss Mary Lynn, myself, and Larry Pless. And across the table, it looked like a damn platoon of them over there. Well, we got down to the end and got to the closing. Of course, it's the closing when you finally pull it, your pants down all the way. And they found out that we had better rail rates into Atlanta than they did. And I thought they were going to split. They were so damn mad. And, basically we had taken the time to get with the railroad and say, okay, all right, y'all are going up on us here. All right, we're putting this on your rail cars. We're shipping it to Atlanta. If it doesn't go directly to that plant, we're going to have to offload it. We're going to have to put it on a truck, and then we're going to have to take it and dump it. And now we've got X on it, and you're wanting to charge us 1.1X.
Right.
And I got them to reduce their rates. I mean, if you could show them where they were competing with trucks, they would listen to you.
Yeah.
And we knew every engineer on those trains down there. We knew what they liked to drink for snacks. And we would have whatever their favorite liquor was for Thanksgiving and Christmas. We would have down at the end of the track. The guys that were routing the trains down there in Jacksonville would come up and spend the weekend with us up there at the lodge, and that's really kind of how we delved into the hunting preserve, which I took all of my customers to that, and we didn't just take we didn't just take the Bill Benzers and those guys. We would take, actually, on these plants, we would take the plant manager.
Yeah.
And then we would take the loader operator.
Right.
Because when that plant manager moved up to area manager, and when that loader operator moved up to plant manager, they remembered that.
You better believe it.
And they nobody had ever done that for them before, and they really appreciated it. And, Martin would go to them and drop the price on the thing. Said, doesn't matter, we're buying from Ray.
What a good story.
Well, I had one, Huddleston Concrete. Do you remember that?
I do remember that name. Yeah.
I took Cecil Key to lunch every Wednesday for about 3 months. And all it was getting me is we were getting fatter. And so anyway, I took him hunting on I said, get your shotgun, pack a bag, we're going to go down. I went down hunting at a place. We stayed Thursday night, ate supper, we hunted. He called me Friday, had a great time. He called me Monday, said, put 2 trucks on me. All right, my dad always said, boy, it's hard for somebody to tell you no over the back of a good pair of bird dogs. And that really, and most of those guys, they can afford to go somewhere. That's not about it. That's where you get to know each other, and you do more business doing that. People like to do the golf stuff and all that, and that's all well and good, but there's nothing like taking somebody hunting and
absolutely.
And you get to where they miss a shot and you just rag their ass. And I mean, here's a customer, and I mean, you get to know each other.
You better believe it.
And it's wonderful fun. Dad really enjoyed that. He was kind of my ambassador when I was over in Alabama, and when we'd have customers come over there, and he'd keep them all poked full of it, and with his stories, and just he really enjoyed it. Got to work the kids, just worked the hell out of them down there on it. They didn't appreciate it at the
No,
time,
they didn't. They do now.
Yeah, they do.
So let's go to Great Recession and get us through the shutting down of the sand business, if you would?
When we sold to Martin over there in Alabama, came back, and I had sold my big dredge because I figured out to sell. You're so freight sensitive on all of that. Just pick out the plants you were close to. Let's take care of them. So I kind of downsized and ended up really made more money doing that.
Yes.
And I actually I built the plant. I bought a scalping tank. I built one to start with. Just bought components from Eagle. And then I was talking to them and said, if I would buy a new tank from y'all, but I'm paying for all those valves I don't need. And they said, well, you just need a scalping tank. I ended up running that last plant. I had a gearbox I got off of a manure spreader and a chain drive, and I ran a 10-foot long, 4-foot diameter rotary screen.
What about that?
I built, and then ran it into the tank. I had a total of 4 horsepower on the plant.
That's unreal. That is unbelievable.
And I ran it when we were in an isolated location instead of paying for getting power down there.
Right.
I ran it off a damn welder, off a 10,000 kW or 10,000 watt welder. And so we got to where we were very, very, I just made it as portable as I could. I built my last dredge and had it to where I didn't have to have a crane to even move it, to launch it. It was very good capacity with it, but I built it to where the center section of the dredge was actually the trailer. And I had, I built the main frame that you had all your machine, the pump, the marine gear, the engine, the hydraulic pumps, freshwater pump tied to on the inside, and then came out the back with that same beam and came out and put a kingpin on the end of it, and then would pin a set of bogey, take the ladder off, and then spin it around, put a set of bogies under that, take a dozer, strike the bank off, and hook to it with a dozer and roll it out of the water.
What about that?
And then take my pontoons off, and then pick it up with an excavator or a loader, whatever I had. Take the dollies out from under it and back a tractor trailer under it, and then we would run basically took an extension cord and put a set of lights, magnetic lights on the back. I could have it out of the water and 100 miles away in one day.
No way.
Yeah, and didn't have to use a crane. So that, we did very well with that, and I mean, we could run lean. I mean, we just, run very lean. And we had, I think after we built the dredge, it was kind of funny, which I can't even spell engineer, now I are one. But the only thing that I really screwed up on it, I didn't make the pontoons long enough in the front. So I was worried about that, so I took it down to the lake behind the house down there at the pavilion.
Yes.
And rolled it in the lake. And
No.
Oh, yeah.
The lake at the pavilion.
The lake at the pavilion.
You
at
put the
farm.
dredge in there.
I pushed the dredge in there. And I said, no, I need to add some more to that. So I did, and, pulled it out, and I just scabbed some more on that. And it worked great. Had it, because you wanted it, to set fairly level. Because, I mean, you're fighting logs and floods and everything else. And it worked great for us. And I ran it, and there was a couple of more spots that I could have gone to, but we got down during the big downturn from, started basically 7, 8 up through there. We were shipping 10%.
That's unbelievable.
Of our original volume.
Wow.
And I mean, I didn't have but 3 people at the plant, so I would pull them off, and we'd do other things. That's kind of when I'd started into grading.
That's right.
And so I would pull them off, and just left one man down there with we had scales on the loader, and learned a lot about that. I had one concrete company, I'm not going to mention their name, call me and said, Ray, we were 200 tons short last month. And I said, I don't know how that can be, man. I'm loading, I didn't have scales on the bucket, but I had loaded my own trucks and then waited, and you know when a truck's loaded. Well, anyway, so I said, by God, it's on the way. So we loaded 200 tons up and sent to them. And next month, everything fine. Month after that, Ray, we're 150 tons short. And I said, okay. I said, it's on the way. So I called Loadright, bought a set of scales, and come to find out, I was giving away about 10% of that sand over there because I didn't want to buy scales or set up scales because we were having to move every 2 years. They came back, told me, and the guy at the plant, at this one particular plant, the loader operator knew that. Well, then all of a sudden, instead of sending 18 tons a load, it was 17.93, it was 18.24. And so anyway, when they called me, and I said, you need to come down here to the plant. And so anyway, we loaded a truck. I said, follow it to the Vulcan quarry. We went up there, it was dead on. And I mean, we calibrated them every single day.
Right.
I rigged up a weight that would roll, and I put it on a teeter.
Yes.
All you had to do was walk up to it with a loader, set the bucket down, it'd roll in the bucket, you'd do it. And, you know, they just didn't change. And the guy had bought a dump truck and was stealing it on the weekends.
Oh, my word.
And how the guy ended up really finding it out, they started having discrepancy on their stone as well.
Yes.
Not as bad, but they started having discrepancy on the stone. So they fired them, and it, you know, that guy did me a favor and didn't even know. I mean, we got basically a 10% increase in our cost. So it worked good. But
so 2000, what did you tell me? Was it 2014 that you
we shut it down. It was either 12 or 13.
Okay.
I pulled the dredge out. We repainted everything, brought it up, and then I had some people. I was selling all that stuff. Had a guy call me, and there was a line of snot around that dredge where they were ooh ah, we want this dredge, and I told them, and they wouldn't. And then they called me back in December, and their dredge was empty, and I had their and so anyway, I sold the dredge. It's still running. Great dredge, and we'd already been doing grading work since I'd kind of downsized. I went ahead, you know, I didn't have enough to do, so we started doing grading, just doing subdivisions.
That's right. I remember that.
Got tired of dealing with the developers, so we got DOT pre-qualified, and then I got my utility contractor's license and utility manager's license, and we started doing small county road work, vertical, horizontal realignment, and fortunately in 2009 picked up the biggest job we ever did. We beat C.W. Matthews by, I think it was 0.5% on this job, and it was really kind of funny because it had some crushing on it. And I just happened to be, I had a full-time estimator, and then my foreman did basically all of the bids. Well, I said, let me look at it before you take this one in, because I mean, this was $11 million job. This is by far the largest job we'd done. And I looked at it, and he had a way bigger number on that crushing, and I cut $150,000 off of that, what number he had on the crushing. It was like 40 or 50,000 yards we had to crush, and cut 150,000 of it. He went up there and we got the job by 50,000. And it just, I happened to be in, and so we had good work through 12, good work through 12. And then I picked up another job right there at the farm, King Mill Road that ran right past the lodge. And we got it and actually got it at a good price. Yeah. And so I can always tell my kids, yeah, I rode my mule to work. So, and I did.
You did, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. But that was really, and we, like I said, we had great work. And then, you know, it wasn't like we all of a sudden started bidding, you know, swinging for the cheap seats.
Yeah.
But we bid 80 jobs in 9 months and got 0.
No kidding.
We had one job that we bid, and it was a small sewer job. I mean, less than $200,000. And they got the price on what our material cost was. Just the DIP, the, you know, structures, manholes, all that sort of, and you just kind of go.
What in the world?
And so anyway, that was about that time that, you know, Vulcan was just starting to come out of that a little bit.
Yeah.
You could see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, yeah,
Hoping
yeah.
it wasn't a train. And so Bart was still with Vulcan at that time. And he said, come in and look at this, see if you'd be interested in doing this. We need another person to come in and do this. Well, I went and looked at it, and I said, yeah. I said, and so anyway, we gave him a price, and we were right there at it.
Yeah.
And, so we started doing that, and I enjoyed doing that. I probably did it too well. In other words, I took extra time that I wasn't getting paid for to do something because, you know, just because of my family connection.
Yes.
And I think they kind of got tired of hearing me because, you know, we'd, like down at Stockbridge, they'd gotten, when they took the old plant down, and I took that down, right where they needed to be stripping was where the old plant was. And you still had all those concrete tunnels that Dad had built in there, and buddy, you have never seen the rebar in all your life.
I bet.
And we got down there. It took us over a month to take that tunnel out. The one blending tunnel.
Yeah.
I mean, and I had, you know, 2 hammers, concrete muncher, you know, hauling it off, and it worked out good. I was able to save them a bunch of money. They were going to thought they had to keep the rebar completely isolated. And I was able to get with EPD because you know, my association with DNR, and I've chaired EPD committee for 12 or 14 years now. As long as it was generated on site, we were able to put that in the stripping, and that was a godsend. And that was when they were starting to dump in the other end of the pit, or the dead end of the pit. I hate to see that, but you kind of get to the point. When one matures like that, and you know that end was absolutely falling off to nothing. You got the railroad up there, got you hemmed in. You're not going to move a damn main line of 7.
No.
And but anyway, it worked out good. And then the superintendent, good guy down there, where they had taken the old primary out, I was getting on him. I said, I need to go down there and take this out. And I need to get it out. And just by sheer luck, he let me. He said, I'll go in down there and get it out. And we cleaned it up. They were able to drill it and open that up and get all, they had to shoot it all in one shot because it was where the pit kind of went into an hourglass kind of deal.
Yes.
It wasn't 2 months after they opened that up, they had a big slip and it covered up, and they would not have had access to their freshwater ponds in the bottom. And that was just sheer luck. I mean,
Right.
That happened. But yeah, just stuff like that. I go in there when I'm stripping. I'm looking at it long term.
Yeah.
I've had experience in the mining end of it, and you can do something trying to cut corners that it takes you years to fix. And some of it, you go out there and you look, and somebody short-sighted has shot up against a haul road and it's cut it down to one lane, and you've got 100-ton trucks sitting there.
Yeah.
Because of, somebody didn't have the discipline to to have a place cleaned off, and they just took the easiest route. And, you know, you cut the heart of the watermelon out every time. You got to eat the rind with it sometimes.
Right.
And
Let me ask you a couple of questions before we wrap up that I'm real curious about. One of them you've alluded to, and that is when you look back over your life, who, and I can tell this is not necessarily an easy question, but who have been the really influential, who influenced you, your philosophy of life, your philosophy of business? Who comes to mind? Who are some of the names?
obviously my dad,
Right.
and I was absolutely, I just absolutely adored him. My father-in-law, Tom Ellis,
Yeah.
he was good in banking and an attorney, and just a great guy. Ended up, he did not want me dating Miss Mary Lynn when we first started, but I won him over, and we became great friends. And he really helped me and taught me a lot about business. And then John Williams.
Yes.
Mr. John, absolutely, he helped me politically, got me really interested in politics, and but just to, help me with the banking end of it, and then the business end of it, and the contacts.
Yes.
And he really, I found out later from his bank president after he died, and I was one of Mr. John's pallbearers, and he, that bank president told me, he said, Mr. John told him that if anything happens to me, you give that boy whatever he wants.
Wow.
And he said, and he said, somebody that'll work like that,
Yes.
and takes care of his parents like that, he'll pay you back. And I always thought
That's
that
good.
was one of the biggest honors that I could have
You
gotten.
better believe it.
Yeah.
Well, that's and your father, in terms of, in addition to being very dear to you and being your friend in the relationship, what would you say were the
He wasn't my friend. He was my dad. And I meant he, very big on discipline, and I mean, he would chew my ass out. It was.
but the relationship
that was it, and I learned from it. And he didn't do it. He did it because he loved me.
Gotcha.
And he was always the boss. I mean, there was no question in that.
Right.
And but he taught me, and from early on, just like I said, he. When we started fencing, when we were doing the haying, when we were doing stuff in the farm, he was preparing me for this. And he had that in his mind, and he always told me, he said, now son, if you're cutting hay, if you're putting up a fence, if you're clearing land, whatever you're doing, if somebody pulls up in a car and they don't know a damn thing about what you're doing, they can look over there and say, all right, that's finished over there. And he said, finish as you go. Keep it clean, keep everything neat, and that was just how he did it. And that, he didn't like to see a loose rock in a quarry anywhere.
Wow.
Clean it up,
Wow.
and then that way, when you get ready to drill, you don't have to do anything but just lay the shot out and start drilling.
Wow.
You don't have to clean up anything, and that just he instilled that in me, and
It really made a big difference.
yeah.
So, last question. What advice would you offer to folks coming into construction materials, into this world, into this business? I guess in life in general, you've had a lot. You've had a very rich life experience. You've done a lot. You've seen a lot. You've been in so many different operations, very different settings, different kinds of people. What advice would you give?
Stay the course. You know, to be successful now, and that's our biggest problem in the industry, and a lot of, you know, a lot of the industries is finding good people. You get people that don't want to learn it from the bottom up, and they don't appreciate it. But you can't be a good manager unless you know when somebody's pulling your leg.
Right.
And the only way to do that is you got to be the one under there changing that trough idler.
Right.
You got to be the one under there, you know, adjusting that crusher, and down in the pit, and helping to load a shot, and you know that. The guys that come out of, and you know, that a lot of these big companies now want to do the training program. And I mean, you have to pay them to do that. They can't come in and, I found a pay stub the other day when I was cleaning out, of course we moved twice, and it was $200 to the penny, and it was 80 hours to the minute.
Oh my!
And that was in San Antonio when Dad told them to work me as hard as they could.
Yeah.
But anyway, and it's relative. You know, those were bigger dollars back then, and I get all that. But I would like to see these training programs to be more absolute hands-on, and you've got to tell them why you're doing that.
Yes.
And you know. And that's one reason I'm so proud of Bart. I mean, he'll do anything, you know. And my dad always said that if a man can work with his hands, he will always have a job.
Yes.
And you know, you think about down in the Depression, Dad had a man show up on a job, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't hire you." I said, "You know, I've got more people than I really need to be paying right now." And so he came back, and they were doing it with sledgehammers then. And he said he came by, and the guy's out there with the sledgehammer right in there with him. And he said, "Fella," said, "you must not have been listening." I said, "I can't hire you." He said, "Mister, I don't have any other place to go, and if I come back and have blisters on my hands, at least that's going to give my family some hope."
Wow.
That just brings tears to your eyes.
Wow.
And that guy worked there that whole week and showed up. He was the first person there.
And the last one to leave.
And Dad said, "I took that out of my pay. And I paid him, and he told me who it was. He ended up staying with them. It was up in somewhere, I think it was in West Virginia, on a job they were on up there when they were, you know, doing like a bunch of gypsies. And, but, you know, people just don't appreciate your most important thing is your job.
Yes.
And all right, you say, oh, family. Well, if you don't have your job and you can't provide for your family. And I don't know, maybe I basically completely skipped a generation, because all of my first cousins, I've got one, we just went to her 90th birthday party, and they're all at least 20 years older than I am. And, you know, when your parents come up through the Depression and lived it,
yes.
You know, you hear that. And that's really just somebody can be successful in this business if they show up and they work and just give a damn.
Right.
But a lot of it I see in the corporate, you're making your decision on what covers your ass and not what's best for the company. And I really hate that. And, you know, you got to fail to learn. I know I can't tell you everything right to do in the sand business, and I'll tell you everything wrong to do. and that.
What'd you tell me one time? I mean, we tried to get it right. The way to...
You become an expert when you make every possible mistake in a very small area.
Well, there was something else about how to make a small fortune.
Oh yeah.
How
do you make a small fortune in the sand business? Start out with a large.
Start out with a large.
Well, Ray, by the way, everybody, we are sitting in a beautiful spot on top of a beautiful ridge looking out into the mountains here at Young Harris at Ray's place. What do you call this? This is your
the barn.
The barn.
It's a wedding venue now.
And we could, if we had some cool refreshments, we would continue on with the conversation. We may have to pick up again with this conversation because I feel like we've only just gotten started. But Ray, I'm so grateful that you took today, take the time today, you and Miss Mary Lynn, and provide. We had a lovely lunch, looking out over the lake, and we've had a good visit. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship. Many good memories that we won't share on the podcast, but thank you, my friend. I appreciate you.
Good to see you, brother.
Take care. Thanks.